Baruchim Aboim. Thank you for joining us. I am again filling in for Rabbi Yusewitz, who is away for a family simcha. We are learning the beginning. We started yesterday, Sefer Ahava, the second Sefer of the Yad Chazaka, which focuses on mitzvahs, which are mitzvahs tmidios, not tmidios in the constant sense of every second, but tmidios just like a tamid, which is every single day. These are mitzvahs that we have to fulfill on a regular basis or constantly. They are ways in which we express our love for the Eibush, ways in which we're reminded of Hashem's love for us. They are collected in Sefer Ahava, and we begin with Hilchas Krishma, the laws of Krishma, and we are up to Perek Beis. Now, close to the end of Perek Aleph, but the second to last halacha, we touched on an important aspect of how to say Krishma, halacha of the timing of the Krishma, but related to how we have to say Krishma, and that is that we have to say Krishma with kavana. And we are going to take it from there in Perek Beis, which focuses on different halachas relating to how one says Krishma. And first and foremost, we say in halacha aleph, Hakiri as Shema v'leichiv in libay bepasuk rishon Shema Yisrael loy yatsa yedei chayvasei. One who reads Krishma and has not focused his heart, paid attention, and concentrated during at least the first pasuk, which is Shema Yisrael, he has not fulfilled his obligation. It is as if he has not said Shema at all. The actual sounds with your mouth are not sufficient. You have to have kavanah v'ashar, but the rest of Krishma, so obviously you have to have a kavanah. But if you failed, if you got distracted, or you, for whatever reason, did not have kavana during Baruch Shem, V'ahavta, V'haya, V'yemer, the brachas, before or after, we are nonetheless Yetza, you are fulfilled your obligation. Afilu hayakoyre b'Torah kedarkai, oy magia es aparshis, ha'ilu ba'ines kriya. Even if somebody was reading from the Torah, just as he normally would, or he was even reviewing the parshas, that is to say, as a sefer, checking a sefer to see that there's no mistakes or cracked letters and so on, and he was reading out loud from the words of parsha of Krishma, and he just read Haftas Hashem Lekacha and V'haya and Vayemer, and he read those parshas like out of a mezuzah, let's say. He is Yetza, even though he is not reading it with the intention to be Yetza Krishma. The who provided Shakiv and Liba, as long as he has had intention, the proper intention to be Yetza, the mitzvah, and to focus on the meaning of the words during the first pasuk of Shema Yisrael. Halacha Beis, Kol Adam Koydin Kidarka. This is that all people read as they are. What is that talking about? That is talking about the activities or the position that you're in or the activities that you're doing do not invalidate your Shema. Bein imdim, whether you're standing, bein mahalchim, or you're walking, bein sheichvin, if you're lying on your side, on a bed, on a couch, bein reichim al gabei behema, if you're riding on an animal, you said Shema. In that position, you're Yetzer. Also, look at the exception to that would be if you are lying face down. The person is prohibited to say Shema while his face is pressed into the dirt, facing down to the dirt, or the earth, right? Or if he is lying on his back. So not on your back, not on your front. We said earlier that if you're sheikhiv, you're yetza. So what does that leave us? You can't lie. You can't read if you're face down, facing the pillow. You can't read if you're facing up, flat on your back. But you can say Shema when you are lying, if you are on your side. A person who is obese and he is not able to balance himself on his side, or if he was ill, let's say a person in a hospital bed where he's either he's too weak to turn over or the bed does not allow him to turn over properly, He turns symbolically, he turns a little bit onto his side as much as he's able to, and he is allowed to say Shema and he's Yetzer. Halacha Gimel. Now here's the exception or the detail you have to know about saying Shema while you're walking, or other ways which we said you're allowed to. But if you're walking, we said you can say Shema, but you have to remember that if you're and this is something that is very practical. Sometimes we're walking to shul and we're saying brachas, we're saying Shema. Uh, Ideally, you say Shema sitting at a table and then having kavan. And as a matter of fact, many people are knowing to say Shema, even Krishma Shal Shachris, if they're going to be davening late and they're saying Shema before davening, that they put on their tefillin in order to say Shema, just to say Shema with tefillin, because we say in Shema we talk about the tefillin, and you don't want to be made Eidos Sheker. You don't want to talk about the need in the midst of putting on tefillin without wearing the tefillin. So in order to properly be miyachid the name of the Eibishter and be makabel oil, so Chassidim Van Shemaisa will say Shema wearing tefillin. But it's not uncommon for balabatim, very busy businessmen, people that are running around, and they're walking down the street saying bracha, saying Shema. Or if you're walking to shul on Shabbos morning and you realize that it's almost Zman Krishma, so you're allowed to say Shema while you're walking to shul, as we said. However, this halacha tells us that when you say the words Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, when kavana is ma'akiv, the lack of kavana would invalidate the Shema. You stop, stand in one place, and say the pasuk. V'asha'ar kodev u'mahalach. Then the rest of Shema he can continue and he can recite while he's walking. Hayoyoshi. What if you talking about almost missing my Krishma? What if you are in a room, in the house, in an apartment, and your friend, your roommate, is sleeping? Shabbos morning, you went to sleep very late at night. So my Krishma was arriving, and your roommate is sleeping. Mitzayir noisei, we wake the person, even if it involves a little distress. We awaken him until he says at least the first pasuk of Shema. From that point on, if his sleep is so deep, he is so deeply, finding it so difficult to wake up, that he can't continue the rest of Shema. We do not force him and prod him and poke him to stay awake in a way that causes him distress. We let him go back to sleep as long as he said the first pasuk of Shema. I just reminded myself of a very geschmack story on the topic of Zman Krishma, which is really yesterday's halacha, but missing Zman Krishma. I remember I learned in Yeshiva in Bruma, and the Beryl Gurevich was the elder chassid who went through a lot he learned in the underground chadarim, and he was a tzir. He was a model of what a chassid should be, and it was something very special just to see him, and to he was a big Yiddish Shemayim, and he once came to yeshiva to make a hatavas cholim because he had a dream that disturbed him tremendously, and he couldn't calm himself down. He needed to come to shul to gather some bachrim and make a hatavas cholim. What was the hatavas cholim? So part of the series, you tell over the bad dream that you had, and it's distressing you, and the people that are listening, there's a nusach. You say a chelma tava chazis. You saw it was a good dream. There's nothing wrong, and nothing. It's not a bad omen. It's not something to worry yourself. It's a good cholim, and thus taking whatever power the dream has and neutralizing it. And as part of the process, he had to share what was this disturbing dream that he had. So he told the Bachram, he gathered the Bachram, and he did this process. And what was the dream that shook him so deeply? He needed to come do this Avodah. He dreamed that he almost missed Man Krishma. Not that he dreamed that he missed. He dreamed that he almost missed Man Krishma, and it shook him up so badly. He came to yeshiva to make a hatavas cholim. And I've always remember that because it left a big impression on me. what it means to take to heart our obligations, even something that it's something that person is one of these things that people you miss it once, you miss it twice, and you start to feel like it's no big deal. No, lightning didn't come out of the sky and knock me out, and I survived, and I'm still from, and I'm still everything. So the Zman Krishna starts to might lose some of its potency. To see El Yid shook to the core of his being because he dreamt that he almost missed Mount Krishna, left a big impression on me, and I hope by sharing it that it left something of that impression on you. Halacha Dal, a person who was engaged in malacha, he's working. Mafsik he must stop what he's doing in order to say at least the whole of the first parsha of Krishma, that is to say, Shema and the Hafta. In order, even though we said that the main, you have to stop really to say the pasuk. The first pasuk is the main part, what you need kavana, but in order that it shouldn't be like a krias arai, it shouldn't feel like just something you just dispense with. So we make sure to say at least the first parsha, which was not the case when we're talking about distressing somebody else to wake them up. It's interesting. Now that is a person doing Isaac in his own malacha. The same is true of a craftsman who is working for somebody else. They likewise stop from the work which they were hired to do, and they say the whole of the first parsha, not just the first pasuk, in order that the Krias Shema should not be something that has no weight to it. It should be sort of a disposable, quick one-liner. Shema and get back to work. The rest he also has to say he has to say, but he can say it while he is sewing or sculpting, pottery, making pottery, or whatever it is he's doing. Even if a person is standing in the top of a tree or on a top of a wall, a scaffolding, they're in a situation where they are not at ease. There's a little anxiousness involved in these precarious positions. Nonetheless, he can continue the rest of Krishma in that uncertain position. He can read the rest of Shema together with the brachas before and afterwards. In other words, Chazal do not require the person to climb all the way down from the tree or to get off the scaffolding in order to say Shema with a calm in a calm state. What if a person is learning Torah when the time of Kriyas Shema comes? So he's not doing his own work, he's not doing someone else's work, he's doing the Eibishter's work, he's learning Torah. Pesek v'koirei, he stops and he says Kriyas Shema u'mavarach l'fanah u'la'achara, and he says the bracha before and the bracha after. What if he is doing work of the community? He does not stop at all. He's let's say he's representing the community in some sort of governmental office, and he has an audience with dignitaries to pursue something for the community, and he forgot to say Krishma before, or if he was busy from before the Zman Krishma, and now it's almost end of Zman Krishma, he does not have to stop and say Krishma. He just continues because he's Isaac b'mitzvah. He's doing something that's a mitzvah to Isaac b'tzarchet tzibur, and he then is Isaac b'mitzvah part of mitzvah, and he if he has time after, then he will say Shema. That brings to mind the famous story of Rabbi Feller, who got a meeting with Professor Green, I think it was, Professor Green, yeah. And Professor Green was at that point unaffiliated, and it wasn't so easy to get a meeting with him, and he was not yet convinced and didn't understand really what the shluchim, these new young shluchim, were doing in town. In the middle of the meeting, Rabbi Feller said, "Oh, I didn't have mincha yet. It's almost shkia." And he stood up in the middle of the meeting in this person's office. He went to the wall and he put a gartel and he davened. And so Professor Green obviously later became from, and he told a story, and this was left a very strong impression on him. So I guess sometimes, even in the middle of an important meeting, to stop and to daven left a very strong impression. But if that's the concern that won't be the case, and instead you choose to this Isaac B'Tzachit Tzibor chooses to continue with his, or he doesn't have that chance because of whatever the nature of what he's doing, he's potter from Krishma during that time. Halacha Vav Isaac B'Achila. If he was eating, he was busy with a soda, or he was in the bathhouse, in the mikvah, or he was in the barber chair being getting a haircut, or he was in a tannery dealing with the smelly chemicals and leather that required to turn hide animal skin into leather, or if the person in question was a dayan involved in hearing and ruling or discussing a din, they must complete the task which they are preoccupied, and only then do they say Krias Shema. In other words, the point here is not if they have to. The time for Shema has arrived, so you might think that you have to stop what you're doing, but because Krishma has 3 hours or whatever it is until the end of Zman Krishma from the beginning to the end, so the Chacham do not require the person to stop as soon as Alisa Shachar as Nitzachama and go running to do Shema. He could wait until he's finished and then say Shema after. However, if somebody did not take the license Chazal gave him to finish his haircut or to finish his meal, and he decides to stop in middle in order to lay in Krishma, this is praiseworthy. Chachamim praise such a person, and that's a beautiful expression of Yirah Shamayim. Good for him. Allah Chazai. Mishi Yorat Lidbel. If a person went down into the mikveh, right, his tummy, he's going to be matar himself. If he is able to come out of the mikveh and cover himself up so that he can say the holy words, and to say Krishma before Netzachama, which is the ideal time of Krishma, right, the Vasikin. Ya'alev Yiskasev Yikra, he is to do so. He's supposed to get out of the mikveh, now already tahir, and he covers himself up, and he says Shema. But if he wants to hit Vasikin, he wants to say Shema before Netzachama, and he doesn't think he has enough time to jump out of the mikveh and cover himself up properly in order to say Shema. He can make himself sneeze in the water that he's standing and say Shema right there and then. Now, obviously, we're talking about water that is murky, that is not see-through, not transparent. Because if you were transparent, it's not enough to be covered physically. As long you have to be covered visually. So, well, if they're murky, what if they smell? So the Rambam goes on to say, you cannot cover yourself with murky waters that smell bad, of Maimarim. Not with waters that are called Mea Mishra. These are Mishra means to soak, waters that are used to soak. They soak various materials in water, and if you happen to be in that water smells also. On the other end of the spectrum, you're not allowed to use sparkling clear water. It also can't be used to cover yourself, to make yourself fit to say Shema, because visually he's not covered, and the parts of his body that are not sneeze are visible through the waters. However, he is able to cover himself in murky waters that do not have a bad smell, and he can stay exactly where he is and say Shema. Now, part of the respect that a person has to have during saying Shema, this is sort of the flip side of Kavana. Kavana means that you're having the proper intent, but also you have to, if you have the proper intent and you're cognizant of the moment of what you're doing. So you have to also have to act focused and stay focused, and not do other things in during Shema. Krishma Yirmes Be'inu says that Rabbi Menalach someone who reads Krishma should not make signals with his eyes. Um, um, he should not make signals with his eyes that somebody is on the other end of the room, and you would like make motions with your eyes, eyeballs, your eyelashes, your eyelids, somehow to try to communicate something that is not obviously not related to Shema. Well, you create bisvasav. You should not make motions and indications with your lips. Well, you shouldn't even use your fingers to indicate to communicate during Shema. As we said before, that we extended the break that we do for someone that has a malacha. He has to say the whole Shema, but the whole first parsha. We don't want the kriya to be treated flippantly and as if it's not substantive. And so this would also indicate that something's not substantive if you're in the middle of saying something and you start to make simonim and hand gestures and hand motions and sign language. It would be disrespectful to the kriya. If he did so, even though this is not a flaw, a deficiency in the kriya itself, it's a problem with your attitude. So you're not considered to have failed to say Shema. You did say Shema. Your Yetzirah is a meguna. Nonetheless, this is considered a disgrace, disgraceful. Now back to how we are supposed to say it. We are supposed to verbalize it, say the words in a way that's audible, that we're able to hear with our ears the sounds that we are making when we read them. However, if you said it inaudibly, you said the words in a way that you're not able to hear yourself, you are nonetheless yetza. Another detail in saying Shema is you must be particular about the letters that we are saying. But if you are not extra particular, under most circumstances, you're nonetheless yetza. And the Rambam will now spell that out in halacha test. Didactic. How is it that we are supposed to be particular about our pronunciation? In the Hebrew alphabet, there are letters that are emphasized, and when they are emphasized, these letters, there's a soft form and a hard form. Beis is the hard form, and Veis is the soft form of the same letter. Hey is the hard form, and Fei is the soft form. So, if the nusach of the Shema has a Beis, hard sound, you're not allowed to express that as a soft sound, as a Veis. You're supposed to be particular to pronounce it correctly. If it's a soft sound, a Fei, you shouldn't pronounce it as a Pei with the hard sound. Hanod, right? The shva sound has also sort of a hard and a soft version. You have the passive and the active. Shva could be shiva, a sound, or it could just be a almost indetectable sound of just the sound of the letter. So Shema would be active shva, and Shema without the I. That's the passive Shema. So you're not supposed to deviate from the correct pronunciation. When it's supposed to be don't pronounce it without the When you're not supposed to pronounce it, don't pronounce it. So part of this care that we are taking to pronounce things correctly is to leave space between letters that might blur together. Anytime you have two letters that are of similar pronunciations, where the end of one word might blur into the beginning of the next word. For example, b'chol levavacha. So they have a lamed at the end and a lamed at the start. Whereas if you're not particular, not careful in pronunciation, you might say b'chol levavacha. Sounds like only there's either one run-on word, and if you have to separate the words, you might only have one lamed. You might think it's b'cha levavacha or b'chol vavacha, and that would not be correct. So you have to take care that you're verbalizing it as it's written, b'chol koida b'chol l'shoya, you read the word b'chol and you pause. B'chizah v'koida l'vavacha, and then you separately pronounce the lamed of l'vavacha. V'chein va'avadetem meheda. We'll find the same thing by the mem between at the end of va'avadetem and at the beginning of the word meheda. And the Rambam adds here, and this is also present in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch as well, Hakarnof and Psil. Even though I myself, I'm not sure why, because a Fei and a Pei don't blur together. And if they were both a Fei, then it would be Hakarnof Psil. I would understand it. So I don't really know why this pair is mentioned in this halacha, but there you have it. Another thing we have to take care of is the Z sound. When you're not careful, sometimes certain sounds that are in the same family might end up sounding like, if you're not careful, you'll say it, you pronounce it differently. So a zayin can sometimes sound like a samach. Tizkiru, you say, or tizkiru. We find also in Kaddish, people often say yiskadal instead of yisgadal. The soft G is pronounced like a hard kuf. And when you're saying Shema, you have to be careful not to fall into those indistinct pronunciations that change the meaning. Zayin shall tizkiru, you have to clearly express the zayin of tizkiru. Another din that's not a continuation of that, but a sort of a new point is that we have to lengthen the dalid of the word echad. Is how long do we have to say that dalid? Sufficiently long that we can reflect and sort of accept the dominion of the Eibishter, the kingship of the Eibishter on the heavens, on the earth, in all its four directions. Now, our pronunciation as Ashkenazim, the dalid is a hard stop, is a hard short sound. We don't have a way to extend the dalid. There are communities where the dalid is pronounced like a th, and in those communities they can literally extend the dalid. I don't even know how to do it, but that's how I remember from my childhood. That's how my mom explained to me that there are communities where that dalid can be extended. The way we are mekayim this, halacha is echad, and people hold that thought and focus on the. Sometimes people lengthen the out laches. Sometimes people just they make it into a shva dalid. I don't know if that's appropriate, but the main thing is bekavona. They don't move on to Baruch Shem until they have reflected on and accepted the Malchus of Hashem in the heavens and the earth in all four directions. We have to be careful not to swallow the ches. We have to pronounce it carefully so that it shouldn't sound like we're saying the word Ichad. Halacha Yud. I'm sorry, so Ichad means Ichad, E is like Ein. It's like like in English, sort of reversing. Ichad, Hashem is Chad, not one. Reversing the meaning of the word Chad. Halacha Yud Koda Adam as Shema b'Halasha Shehi Mevina. There are things in Torah that must be read specifically in Lashon Kodesh. Shema, says that the Rambam, is not one of those things, and we learn this from the word Shema. Shema doesn't just mean to hear; it means to understand. And Shema Yisrael means understand Yisrael, and therefore that's licensed to say Shema in whatever language it is that you understand. However, the halacha test that we just learned, where we spoke about how you have to be so particular in verbalizing and vocalizing in a way that's not that doesn't convey a different meaning. So if you're saying it in English or in Spanish or in Russian, you have to be very careful not to properly vocalize it, so you're not saying words that have the wrong meaning, just as you would in Lashon Kodesh Medaktik by Lashon. You have to be particular in expressing those words, and also in choosing the words in translation. Right, translation is always very difficult to make sure you get the precise meaning. So you have to be medaktik in that language. Just as you would be when you are precise in the words that you're using and the way that you're pronouncing them when you're saying Shema and Lashon Kodesh. Now it's important to remember to know this about translations. When we go back to the original, we're always leaving ourselves open to understanding nuance that we would not necessarily understand when we just have a translation. So Baruch Hashem, we live in a time of Afatzas Hamayanus, not just Afatzas Hamayanus of the Baal Shem Tov and Chassidus, but also Afatzas Hamayanus of Chlal of Torah that has been spread so far and wide in ways that is accessible to everybody, not just in actual access, but also in translation and interpretation, explanation. But it's always good to remember that in the original, in Lashon Kodesh, there are layers of meaning and nuance that are not always captured in a translation. It's always good to try to read the original when you can, and just be aware of the shortcomings of translation and interpretation. When you are reading a translation, just to know that there are rich nuances and alternative meanings that are not represented in your translation. Halacha Yud Aleph, Lemafreya means out of sequence, a person who reads the Shema out of sequence, reading a later pasuk earlier, is not Yaitza. But this is only true within each parsha if you scramble the psukim. If a person read the parshas in the wrong sequence, let's say Vahaya before Vahafta or Vayimr before Vahaya, that is not subject to this halacha, even though you're not permitted to do so. You have to read it exactly as Chazal laid it out for us. Ani Omer, says the Rambam, in the very rare, it's rare for the Rambam in the Yad HaChazal to take ownership. It's not unique, but it's not a common thing for the Rambam to take ownership of a psak in this way. Usually the Rambam is just quotes the halacha and without mentioning the alternatives, without any personal stempel here. The Rambam says, it is my opinion that he is Yetzel because the parashiyos, as they are organized in Shema, are not in their natural habitat. They're not in the natural sequence and place. They're not actually put together that way in the Torah. And it was Chazal that put them together. So jumbling them out of order is not as great of a crime as when you're jumbling psukim that are next to each other in the Torah and you're doing it and you're reading it wrong. On that note of reading things out of order or not as they are written, if you read a pasuk and then you repeat the entire pasuk again, that is considered a disgrace, but not more than that. And halachically, there's no violation here. It's just a disgrace. It's not appreciated or approved. If he reads a single word, not the whole pasuk, just one word, and he repeats it again. Shema, Shema. For example, if he repeats the word Shema, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, Meshatkin, I say he is silenced. And the reason for that is, particularly by Shema, the word Shema makes it sound like he is. It sounds like he is saying Shema and being makabel on himself, because the whole point of Shema is Kabbalah Samalchus, for accepting the rulership of Hashem. And if you duplicate the words, it sounds like you're doubling up and taking on yourself two authorities. Yeah, and this is yeah, that's what Mishnah. That's correct. Before that, we didn't say that we silence him, because if you're saying a whole pasuk, it doesn't sound like you're doubling up on anything. It sounds like you're not taking it seriously. But in any case, it's not appreciated, and we consider it called a gnai. If you read the psukim with gaps, with breaks. You didn't read. You said Shema, or you said V'ahavta, and then you waited and you said the next pasuk. Even if the pauses, the silent pauses that were in the interim, were long enough to complete the entire Shema, in that pause, Nonetheless, that does not invalidate your Shema, and you are Yetza. Who Sheyikra al Seder, provided, as we said in the earlier halacha, that it was said in the correct sequence. Kra'ah misnamnim. If a person said Shema while he is dozing, who Mishaina related to Mishena, dozing is defined here as somebody who is not fully awake but not fully asleep. Yatza, he was Yetza Bavachi Arab Pasuk, going back to the earlier pasuk where we talked about Kavana, or the earlier halacha where we talked about Kavana, as long as he is fully awake for and having proper Kavana for the first pasuk. If he says he mumbles it sort of sleep talking, the rest of it he was Yetza. Allah Gimel Safek Kara Krishma Safek Loy Kara Chazer V'Kaira Umevarach L'Fonal Charaz. Here's actually a very interesting halacha. Generally, we say that Safek Brachas Lahakal. If we have a Safek, we said a bracha, we assume that we didn't not say the bracha. Sorry, we assume that we did say the bracha, or we don't want to take Hashem's name in vain, and we'd rather just lean to assume that we didn't. But that's because brachas are derabanan generally. Krishma, because it's deraisa, it's a suffix deraisa, and therefore we want to cover our bases, and we assume that we did not say Shema. We say there, and because every time we need to say Shema, we say it with a bracha. So if you are not sure you said Shema or not, you repeat Shema again, assuming that you did it already, but you read Shema and you do say the brachas both before and after. However, if he is clear that he definitely did say Shema, but he can't remember if he said the brachas, if he did say the brachas, or he did not say the brachas, then it is nothing more than a Safek brachas, a Safek Rabbanan, and we do not repeat Hashem's name, and we do not say the brachas. Cut off the ta'ah. A person read Krias Shema and he made a mistake. He skipped a pasuk. He skipped a word. He goes back to the point where he made the mistake, and he continues on without any psukim or words or anything. Now let me mention when partial parsha any days a parsha hishlam bezet zarch la'atchil. Chayzel parsha shayna shehi va'aftas avaylik. A person's mind wandered, and he wakes up and he finds himself in the middle of Krias Shema. He knows he's between one parsha and the next, but he doesn't know if he's just finished va'hafta. He just finished Shema, he's covering v'hafta. He's just finished v'hafta, and he has to start v'hoya. He doesn't know where he's holding. So the halacha is you go back to the first break that we have, which is between Shema and v'hafta. We go back to the first parsha and we say v'hafta Hashem Elokecha. If he snapped out of his daydream and he finds that his mouth went on without him, and he is somewhere in the middle of a Perek, and he doesn't know where. He knows the middle of a Haya, but he can't remember. He doesn't know. He wasn't paying attention to his own mouth, and he doesn't know where he's holding. He goes back to the beginning of the Perek. He goes back to the beginning of a Haya. So the word uchsavtam appears twice in Shema, once in the first parsha, which is v'ahafta, and one in the second parsha, which is v'haya. So if he was daydreaming and he snapped in and he caught himself saying the word uchsavtam, he doesn't know if he's in the middle of v'haya or in the middle of v'ahafta, he goes to the earlier one, which is v'ahafta, of Shema, in other words. But if as he is snapping into consciousness here, he said uchsavtam leman tizker leman yirbu yimechem. His mouth continued to say the words leman in a chayzer. He trusts his mouth. He trusts the autopilot. We trust the custom, sort of the habit of his mouth that's talking where he's holding. We said before that you're able to say Shema while you're moving in motion, right? You're walking, you're riding, or if you're standing on the street and someone else is walking and riding by, or wherever you are. So there was an encounter here. Either you encountered others or others encountered you. Right? They want to greet you, and they will be offended if you don't greet them back. So what's the halacha? If the person who's saying Shema find himself at a natural break point between one Perek and another Perek, so if the person who you encountered is a person who you are obligated to show respect, he encountered his father, or his father encountered him, or it was his father, it was his Rebbe, or anybody who is higher than him in stature and in Chachma and Torah. So he has to initiate and say Shalom Aleichem to his father if he's in between the Perakim. And if he doesn't, if it's a regular person, someone who's not obligated to show extra respect to, but that person did say Shalom Aleichem to him, not realizing he's in Shema, so he has to react. He has to respond and say Aleichem Shalom. And again, this is between the Perakim. I don't know Halacha L'Maisa. I'm sure Rabbi Yusewitz would be able to enlighten you. But if I don't know if it was Halacha L'Maisa, if nowadays people know, they're not going to take it personally once they realize you're saying Shema. They're going to apologize to you that they interrupted you. So maybe if the person will understand, maybe the Halacha L'Maisa is different. Either way, you shouldn't be possibly Halacha L'Maisa from a Rambam. You should, if you have a shayla, you ask a Rav, and if you want to learn for yourself, you also make sure to learn from Shulchan Aruch. The halacha that says explicitly, you could obviously follow from Shulchan Aruch. Halacha design hoya kodev emsa parsha. However, what if when this encounter occurs, you find yourself in the middle of a parsha? So we don't initiate a greeting to somebody to whom we are owe respect, because we're talking today, but we're in the middle of a parsha. We don't interrupt the middle. However, if it's somebody who you have a reason to fear, someone who has a rightful authority as a king, or anos, or someone who has authority not by right but by might, by force, who you are afraid will harm you. So such a person, so even in the middle of the parsha, we will initiate a Shalom Aleichem, somebody who you are merely obligated to honor. But so we don't initiate a greeting, but if a father or a rebbe or anyone we're obligated to respect initiated to us, told us Shalom Aleichem, then even though we're middle, we do respond. We wouldn't initiate, but we do respond Aleichem Shalom. We were describing the halachas of whether you're in between parts or you're middle, and so as a final halacha in Perek Beis, Rambam defines for us these breakpoints, these natural breakpoints. Between the first bracha and the second bracha, is considered a breakpoint. Between the second bracha and the word Shema, between Shema, meaning Shema, Baruch Shem, and Vahafta, is all part of one parsha. And then between the end of Vahafta and the beginning of Vayim Shemaya, the last word of Vayim Shemaya to the word of Vayimer. So summarizing again, at those breakpoints called Bin HaPrakim, we can initiate and ask, inquire to wish Shalom Aleichem, or ask about the Shalom of someone whom we are obligated to respect, and we're allowed to respond to any person. But in between, we would only initiate to those we fear, and we would only respond to those we have to respect. We mentioned this yesterday, that we look at the word emes as if it's part of Vayemer, but really emes is the beginning of the bracha achrena, bracha shalachareh. And so between the words emes and v'yatziv, we consider that ke'emtza perek appropriately, or naturally. And you're not allowed to interrupt unless it's a person who you're obligated, who you have reason to fear, or if a person is a person that you're obligated to respect. So if we could summarize or take one lesson from this parsha, if we can take from this Perek Rambam, is the importance of kavana, which we focused on, and also the importance in being particular in the words that we say and how we say them, to make sure that we are not just it's not just our hearts in the right place, and it's not just the thought that counts, but we should also do the maisa, and in this case the maisa is the dibur, to do it correctly and appropriately up to the best of our ability and in a way that's clear, and that way the kavanah is b'shleimus and the maisa is b'shleimus, and we turn to the Eibishter. We know Hashem's kavanah for us is only good, and we ask that also the maisa, Hashem's actions in our lives, should only be that we could all enjoy open good, revealed good, and the ultimate good, the Mashiach Tzidkenu. See you tomorrow.